I'm so honored to introduce this next speaker and this next block, which is really focused on the future, where Bitcoin takes us. So who has read The Price of Tomorrow? How many of you think that the future is brighter because of Bitcoin? I shared this story a little bit in the panel that I did yesterday. I was starting to lose hope in the future before I found Bitcoin. I was working as a reporter. I was covering a lot of tragedies. I was not making enough money to feel financially secure. And I looked out 10, 20 years from where I was, and I thought, how am I going to ever afford to have a family? How can I afford to buy a house, which was my family's American dream, why they came here? And how would the future look with all of us becoming more and more divided? But one of my favorite things that I read in Price of Tomorrow is Jeff's brilliant insight that people do not naturally hate one another if they are content and have abundance. They're manipulated to be against one another because they feel discounted, right? So what would the future look like on a Bitcoin standard? And when I learned about this amazing technology, I started to have so much hope. I started to plan for my future in a way that I never had before. I started to think about my children that I don't even have yet, my grandchildren that I don't have. Who here has Bitcoin for children or grandchildren who do not exist yet? Isn't that amazing? And I'm so honored again to introduce Jeff Booth because he is one of the most thoughtful, brilliant minds in this entire space. I am so lucky to call him a friend, and friends are really the family we choose. And there is no one who recognizes the value of people and connections and love. So with that, I introduce my brother, Jeff Booth, with his talk about the honest path forward. Give it up for Jeff Booth.
So when Saylor opened his talk the other day, he talked about what could he say here, and that just rang so true for me. And how do you create a presentation for a group of people you care so much about, that you love, that have given you so much? So this is my hope that this is that. So we all quite literally construct our own reality. All of our past knowledge goes into creating it. All of our emotions, creating a picture of our reality. And everyone else we know does the exact same thing. Some slightly different, some very, very different. But here's the interesting thing. They're all equally true for all of us. And mostly, we defend our picture because it's ours, and we couldn't be wrong. And then we look at other people's pictures of how they're living their life, and we talk about them all the time. And we can't understand why they can't see the things holding them back. Their picture is distorted. Yet we very rarely look inside our own picture to see if it is. And all of our baggage, all of our emotions, our influences, our fears, our security, our insecurities, our ideas, all of those things go into creating that picture of our reality. Things we know that are true because they've always been that way for us. So we have a super hard time when something conflicts with that picture. We typically either reject it or ignore it outright. It's too hard to imagine. Or we end up fighting it. And even if we accept something new, what is most normal is to take your pre-existing baggage, all of those things you know, and drag them into the new picture, trying to make the new reality conform with your previous picture, rather than understanding what's imposed by that new reality. So that's why the discovery of Bitcoin is so hard to grasp. It's so hard for us all to grasp. It was so hard for me to grasp. It's so hard for many of you to grasp. It's a change so profound, it changes everything else. And you can see what ends up happening. Some ignore it, some fight it. And even once you think you get it, it's normal to carry all of that existing baggage into what it means. And it's confusing, and your picture is distorted. And in an open, decentralized, and secure protocol that is both bounded by energy and creates abundant energy by its very existence is something the world has never seen before. Never. And one of the things I'm kind of fond of saying is, and you've probably heard me say this too many times to count, is if it stays decentralized and secure, it changes everything. Absolutely everything. And a lot of people ask me, well, what do you mean by that? Are you scared it's not? And I'm not scared one iota, because what's happened is the insight of that Satoshi gave us and the insight of the decentralization and security together that the human history has never had, and our insight that protects the network from that, means there's tens of thousands of nodes, soon to be hundreds of thousands of nodes, tens of thousands of people working to keep that decentralized and secure. And to try to go against that would be going against the insight of what we know that means for society, what we know that means for humanity. And I would bet against that. I would bet against somebody being able to change my node because I'm not for sale. And I know so many of you that are not for sale for any price. And so all of the innovation, all of the ideas that are going in to keep this decentralized and secure, we now know how important this is for humanity. And more people are learning every day. So if this protocol is a discovery never seen before, and it has the potential to touch everything else, then none of our history books, none of our prior knowledge, nothing would be able to see the implications. Yet, we would be carrying our baggage, looking from the past into the future. And you really have to look, what does this future impose on your reality? And that's really hard to do, and it's what we call falling down the rabbit hole. And as you come to grips with what it means, it shatters your preconceptions one at a time about how things worked in the past, and you knew they should work in the past like that, and how they'll work in this new reality that Bitcoin's imposing. And it changes your picture, and it's confusing. It's confusing as all get up, and everybody goes through it, including me. And just when you think you get it, you discover something else, and you go, wow, this rabbit hole is super deep. And every one of you in this audience and me are on a different level of this rabbit hole. It's interesting because as soon as we get it, we can't imagine all of the other humans who don't get it yet. And we were just them. It's crazy. So one of the first steps down the rabbit hole that a lot of people go is, what is money? How do economics work? And again, it's confusing as our picture is so out of tune with the picture that we see today. We believe in inflation. We believe it's required. But the natural state of a free market is deflation. And that simple statement right there has profound consequences. Most people take what I just said there and they hear it over and over again. And they say, yep, I agree with that. And they go right on to believing that inflation is required without realizing the implications of what that means. And so why is that statement true? Because what we do as humans is we solve problems. And we choose the things that give us more value. Now imagine if Google tomorrow said, we're going to charge you for $5 a click. What would you do? You would go somewhere else that gave you more value. And so you can see in this, growth, the way people are measuring growth today is a paradox. Because more growth in the age of a free market and exponentially advancing technology means faster productivity gains and faster deflation. And that means as all prices fall to the marginal cost of production forever. By the way, that's what Bitcoin is measuring. Bitcoin isn't measuring, when people convert their Bitcoin, they think it's going up to US dollars or Venezuelan peso, or any Turkish lira or anything. What they're really doing is converting the thing that's repricing everything to the thing that isn't to price things. In Bitcoin terms, all prices are falling forever. That's what's happening. It's imposing that reality. And if it stays decentralized and secure, that is what's going to happen forevermore as you gain the abundance. And that means that every soul on this planet gets richer every year. Not some of us, all of us, by the productivity flowing to them in the form of lower prices. It also means that anything that stops that isn't economics. It isn't economics at all. It's theft. And theft might sound like a harsh word for people just entering this, but what else would you call it? And so it's also way worse than people realize. Way worse, because most people measure inflation from zero. But you should be measuring the rate of theft from the implied rate of productivity, which might be negative 5% every year. All of society, all 8 billion people all over the world would be getting richer at that rate, and it would be going faster and faster. And so the rate of theft has to increase proportionally, and that's what we're seeing. And it leads us to a provocative point. And if the natural state of a free market isn't practicing economics, then what is it? Isn't it practicing a control system that steals from us? And you start to see your own actions inside that control system and what it's doing, and you start to see the incentives accruing the wrong way everywhere. You start to see, I'll give you an example of the Magnificent Seven, right? Google's in the Magnificent Seven. And it's one of the only ways to protect your value you wouldn't leave your value in the bank because you lose more of your money faster. So people think they're making money in Google. And so they're both using Google because it gives them more value, and Google's removing labor faster and faster on the path to AI, and people are storing their wealth in Google and then wondering why it is these monopolies have so much power over them. And they are making them stronger. The good news is this: Bitcoin's repricing Google too, and repricing all the cash flows, and will forever. And so all of these things, you start to see that only a new system outside of the existing system can actually take us to where we want to go. Next journey down the rabbit hole for many is how that relates to political systems. And if economics wasn't based on free markets, and really economics is simple, prices fall to the marginal cost of production, and we trade with each other all over the world, we try to gain more value, then you would see, but instead economics was based on a theft, and that theft had to grow over time. Wouldn't it make sense that politics was just a control system about who got more of the spoils? And then you start to see all of your friends starting to argue with which political party is better, which person gets more of the spoils, when it's all based on theft. And they are so convinced in their picture that they're right, and they're so convinced in their picture that they're right, that they fight and yell at each other and scream, all making themselves weaker and making the system stronger over them by giving their energy to the thing that's co-opting them. Both sides. And this next one, exploitation, was a super hard one for me. And it was a super hard one because I didn't want to believe that some of my own success wasn't really my own, that it depended on a system of extraction from others. It depended on others losing from my win. That exploitation wasn't a bug of the system, it was a feature. And because if you think about what that means, if other countries constantly need to revalue their currency to ours, then we can exploit those countries. We can take their raw materials and labor to keep our way of life. And it's interesting to me to see people in the developed world now just starting to see this. It was interesting for me to see this, because what I realized as it was starting to happen more and more in the developed world, more people were taking issue and yelling at their governments and everything else. What I realized is this has been going on for a long time. to 7.5 billion people on this planet, and it's getting worse. We're just starting to see it in the developed world as it's getting worse. And so if that's what it looks like, and here's Democratic Republic of Congo, and you think about what the 70% of cobalt comes for our batteries comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And they make $2.50 an hour in horrific working conditions to dig up that cobalt. Well, if you look over and you say how fast electric batteries are growing around the world, wouldn't you think that somebody that had that much of what we need to be rich? It would seem to make sense, right? But instead, IMF goes in and imposes loans, puts them in a debt trap, and then every 2, 3, 4 years has to revalue the currency down to keep that labor low, and forcing massive parts of our population into essentially modern-day slavery. And it pains me to say that. It pains me to say that. But meeting some of these people through Alex Gladstein and others, and calling them friends, and seeing what they deal with every day, and I just ask myself, what would you do every day? What would you do? Would you get on a boat and try to get to somewhere else? Of course you would. What would you do for your family? Of course you would do the same. And so it starts to pull into why this system problem can't be solved by the system that's creating the problem. So where does wealth come from? And by wealth here, I'm not just talking how much money you have. In fact, I'm not talking about how much money you have at all. I'm talking about real wealth. And the wealth we take for granted is a sum of our ideas, thoughts, and actions. It's that simple. So it should be pretty obvious that if you disconnect people, if you take people out, less ideas means less wealth for all of us. Even if we don't measure them, it has a cost. So then where do ideas come from? And one of those ideas was the printing press, Gutenberg's printing press. And what did it do? It allowed ideas to propagate. It allowed more ideas. And those ideas, because before that, we lived in church and state, very different world, and the world didn't move very fast because society was told what to look like, and there were less ideas. And then because of that insight, you had more storage and information and idea sharing. That led, that insight, that idea, led to Michael Faraday. Most people in this room wouldn't know who Michael Faraday is, but he came up with a thought that electromagnetism came in waves, and it ended up being called field theory, or Faraday lines or lines of force. And imagine going back at that time, and you have, and how did he come to that? He was a bookbinder. He was a poor working class family who worked as a bookbinder because he wanted to learn more of the world's information at the time. And he became one of the greatest scientists that ever lived, at least up to that point, because he had these insights. James Clerk Maxwell took those insights and created the perfect equations, math equations, to describe how those waves propagate. Those equations today are the foundation of all communication technologies, all satellite communications, all electrical power generation distribution, medical and imaging and health, consumer electronics, lighting, and more. And here's the interesting thing when you think through that. Faraday wouldn't have seen something had the printing press wouldn't have been invested. He would have never been discovered. He saw something that was all around us for thousands of years that wouldn't have been discovered, and then Maxwell took and built onto those, and we probably most people don't know those names. Those insights would then turn into Charles Babbage's analytical engine, the first computer, and Ada Lovelace becoming the first computer programmer. To John von Neumann, who became just a great in physics, math, and science, and actually created game theory. the whole science of game theory. To Claude Shannon, who became the father of information theory, revolutioning the way we understand and process digital information, storage information. Essentially, bytes and storage all came from this man, father of information theory. And so when you think about this, those are 5 people. I could have put 1 million more that have touched our lives. 5 people. Many don't know those 5 people. And you can see the profound implications they've had on your life. It's everywhere. And you don't even know them, but they are connected. And so if every single person on this earth is connected in some way to this and ideas propagate, then disconnecting them has consequences, even if we can't measure them. And wouldn't we all suffer if the world looked like that? And I kind of think about what idea is all around us right now that we fail to see. And for me, that idea actually turns into abundance. It's already here. Just most people were in a system that we can't see it. What about you? Where do your thoughts begin? Who influences them? Where do they end? Where do they end? And do you even know? Your ideas, thoughts, and actions, while they may feel personal, are the sum of the influences upon all who have walked this earth before you, and many who have traveled with you now. We are an intricate web of those ideas. Each one of us essential. Essentially, each one of us a ripple expanding through time. See, it's not just you in isolation. You carry within you the essence of everyone who has ever touched your life. And that's what the Bitcoin protocol becomes, a network that connects us, and a network that connects us in service to us. Because it allows us to inscribe the best of us into it. That's what we're all doing. That's what you feel here. Even if you don't know you feel it, that's what you're doing. And it allows the free market to work so that all prices continue to fall forever for all of us, for all of society. So now imagine in the world today where we probably have, getting smaller, but call it 500 million minds, preying on 7.5 billion minds, because that's really what it is, and taking those 7.5 billion additional minds into a network where they have all ideas. Can you imagine? And think about what that means. Faster productivity, faster deflation, faster growth, all in service to us. We can't, it's so hard to even imagine. And it repeats forever. If Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, it repeats forever. As robots and AI do more of the work, prices keep falling forever. And that takes us to an interesting thought. What if the singularity that people are talking about isn't something to fear? The real singularity is what Bitcoin enables. The day that we allow the productivity that we produce to flow to us naturally. And that creates untold abundance for humanity by that simple change to an open, honest, decentralized, and secure ledger. And think about what that means. Like people, when you think about when people are talking about AI, what it means is we are the supercomputer, and the tool enables us. That's what it means. And so I'm asked probably the most often, when does this happen? Like it's a light switch. When does this happen? When to this hopeful, abundant future? And I look around and feel like I'm already living in it, and so are many of my friends and others, and you just want more people. I'm going to tell you 2 stories to kind of reinforce that point. And first story I want to tell you is really myself as a hypocrite, because I knew a lot of this. I wrote a book on it. I spent time on it, and I bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and I keep buying Bitcoin today. And then 2 years ago, just over maybe 2.5 years ago, an insight hit me. And this was the insight. I was spending 90% of my time inside the existing system, on boards, different companies, doing work within the existing system, and effectively I had a hedge against that because all my time was making the existing system stronger. And that's why we started the capital company, to be Ego Death Capital, to actually, so I could shift my time all to where I wanted the world to go. And so I could spend my most important energy where it needed to be spent. So if I was a hypocrite 2.5 years ago, and I knew all of this, then I have massive empathy for everybody else who's still caught in the system, and at some time will understand what this looks like. But what I'll tell you is as I moved my energy into the system, everything expanded. It was so easy. Everything was in harmony, and it just got easier and easier. And the second story I want to tell you about is a story at Pacific Bitcoin a couple of years back. And this young man came to me, and he said, I had to meet you, and introduce my wife and 3-month-old daughter. And he said, this wouldn't be me if it weren't for you. And that story has repeated similar stories, even at this conference, a lot of people saying that. And the thing that touches me in that story is not my impact on him. What touches me in that story is I go into my mind and I think all of the other people's impact on me that got me here, it's got me standing in the stage. Many of you in this audience are those people who impact me every day. So for that, I have immense gratitude. And you start to see it. You start to, this is where I get a little emotional. You start to see it. This is what humanity looks like. This is what it looks like when it's connected. It's so powerful. There is no they, only we. And we create the world we want to see. And I'm so proud to share it with you.